Hello everyone, this is Booma Devi from PG and Research Department of Economics, Sita Lakshmi Ramaswamy College, Trichy. In this video, we are going to explore the theory of HARROD-DOMAR growth model. HARROD-DOMAR model is a Keynesian model of economic growth. It is used in development economics to explain economy's growth rate in terms of the level of savings and of capital. It suggests that there is no neutral reason for an economy to have a balanced growth. The model was developed independently by Roy F. HARROD in the year of 1939 and F.C. DOMAR in the year of 1946. Although a similar model had been proposed by Gustav Cassel in the year of 1924, the HARROD-DOMAR model was the precursor to the exogenous growth model. This growth model focuses on the dual role of investment. On the one hand, new investment generates income and effective demand on the other. It increases productive capacity of the economy by expanding capital stock. He attached importance to income generation and neglected productive capacity. HARROD framed his theory based on few assumptions. The first assumption is savings income ratio, that is propensity to save, is constant. Next, technical progress has been assumed to be neutral or labor augmenting. The third assumption is capital output ratio and labor output ratio are constant. The last assumption is constant returns to scale operates, that is the output increases at a constant rate. Based on these assumptions, he have stated three questions. The first question is, how can steady growth rate be achieved with fixed capital output ratio and fixed saving income ratio? The second question is, how can the steady growth rate be maintained, or what are the conditions for maintaining these? Third, how do neutral factors put a ceiling on the growth rate of the economy? To answer all these questions, HARROD has explained three growth rates. That is actual growth rate, warranted growth rate, and natural growth rate. The actual growth rate is denoted by G. It is determined by the actual amount of savings and investment available in the economy. And it can be defined as the ratio of change in the income to the total income in a given period, which can be written as G is equals to changes in income divided by real income. The actual growth rate is determined by two factors, that is savings income ratio and capital output ratio. The relationship between the actual growth rate and its determinants can be expressed as GC is equals to S. This equation explains savings and investment are equal in terms of ratio, where G is equals to changes in income divided by income, that is the actual growth rate. C refers to changes in capital divided by changes in the income, or changes in the investment divided by changes in the income. Or we can denote that as marginal capital output ratio. S is nothing but savings investment ratio, which we can write it as S is equals to S by Y. By substituting these values in the equation 1, we will get I is equals to S. Where this equation, the equality between savings and investment is a necessary condition for achieving a steady growth. It is also called the dynamic equilibrium. Next, we have warranted growth rate. It refers to the growth rate of the economy when it is working at full capacity and making optimum use of the resources, that is machines and manpower. It is also known as the full capacity growth rate or full employment growth rate or potential growth rate. It is denoted by GW. GW is determined by two factors, that is capital output ratio and saving income ratio. The relationship between these can be written as GWCR is equals to S. That is, GW refers to warranted growth rate, CR refers to the amount of capital required for maintaining the warranted growth rate, and S denotes savings income ratio. The economy would be in stable growth when G is equals to GW and C is equals to C. The actual growth rate must be equal to the warranted growth rate. The actual investment must be equal to the expected investment if an economy is to achieve stable growth. Next, we have natural growth rate. It is derived from the identity Y is equals to L into Y by L, where L is the labor and Y by L is the productivity of labor. The natural growth rate is made up of two components, that is the growth of labor productivity and the growth of labor force. Both the factors are exogenously determined and denoted by GN. The natural rate of growth plays an important role in HARROD growth model in two perspectives. The first one is it defines the rate of growth of productive capacity or the long run full employment equilibrium growth rate. Second, it defines the upper limit to the actual growth rate, which brings cumulative expansion in the HARROD model to a sticky end. Next, we are going to see the relationship between G, GW and GN. If G is greater than GW, G can continue to diverge from GW until it hits GN. G cannot be greater than GN in the long run. With a fixed coefficient of productivity, the full employment of labor requires G is equals to GN. The full employment of labor and full utilization of capital requires G is equals to GW is equals to GN. So this situation is called golden age by John Robinson. If GW is greater than GN, there will be a chronic tendency towards depression because it is not sufficient to fulfill the necessary condition. What if GW is greater than GN? There will be a demand for inflation because it exceeds the necessary condition. Given the inequality, there are four possible ways to equal the GN and GW. When GN is greater than GW, then the first possibility is to reduce the rate of growth of labor force. It measures to control population size in order to solve the problem of unemployment. Second, a reduction in the rate of growth of labor productivity would help, but this will reduce the growth of living standard of the people, those who are in work. Third, a rise in saving ratio could narrow the gap between GN and GW. Fourth, reduction in the required capital output ratio through the use of more labor-intensive techniques. Let us understand the relationship between G, GW and GN with the help of a diagram. So, in the horizontal axis, we are going to measure investment and savings, and in the vertical axis, we are going to measure the growth. This diagram shows a situation in which GN exceeds GW. In order to equalize GN and GW, first we can bring down GN to GW by measures to curb labor force growth. Second, we can shift rightwards to savings and income curve through monetary and fiscal policy and foreign borrowings to raise GW to GN. Third, we can adjust income and investment curve, reducing CR through the use of more labor-intensive techniques of production. In HARROD model, the parameters and variables are independently determined. In the long run, the savings ratio may not be fixed, but it will adjust. In the period of recession, savings may fall, and in the periods of demand inflation, savings may rise. If GW is greater than GN and there is a tendency towards depression, this will tend to reduce the share of profit in national income and increase in the share of wages. So that if the propensity to save out of profits is higher than the propensity to save out of wages, Changes in the distribution of income will lower the overall savings ratio and reduce the GW towards GN. If GW is lesser than GN and there is a tendency towards demand inflation, the share of profit in national income would tend to rise, increasing the overall savings ratio and rising GW towards GN. Now let us move on to DOMAR's model. This model is similar to HARROD model, but developed the theory for reacting to Keynes' general theory for two reasons. First, investment has two effects, that is an income generating effect through multipliers and capacity creating output through productivity effect. Second, unutilization of capital inhibits investment and reduces income. Reduction of income brings deficiency in demand that results in unemployment. So, he starts his theory by assuming certain facts. First, the income is determined by investment through multiplier, which is denoted as YT is equals to IT by S. Savings income ratio is assumed to be constant, where Y is the output, I refers to investment, S shows the saving income ratio, and T refers to time period. The second assumption is productive capacity is created by investment according to the potential social average investment productivity, which is denoted by sigma. It is also assumed to be constant. The relationship between the productive capacity and investment YT bar minus YT minus 1 bar is equals to IT divided by alpha. Here, YT bar minus YT minus 1 bar shows the changes in productive capacity over a T time period. Alpha measures the marginal capital output ratio. It is a reciprocal of potential social average investment productivity. That is, alpha is equals to 1 by sigma. The third assumption is the investment is induced by output growth together with entrepreneurial confidence. So it is represented as an equation IT divided by IT minus 1 is equals to G into YT minus 1 minus YT minus 2 divided by YT minus 2 minus YT minus 3 into DT. In this equation, G is an increasing function of the rate of output acceleration, but decreasing the function of the junking ratio. If junking ratio is 0, investment increases at the rate of output rises. The fourth assumption is employment depends on the utilization ratio, which is expressed as the ratio between actual output and productive capacity. Can be written as NT divided by LT is equals to H into YT divided by Y, where H is greater than 0. So here N is represented as employment, L is the labor force, Y is the actual output, and Y bar is the productive capacity. Here H is denoted as employment coefficient and T, it refers to time period. This equation explains the ratio of employment to labor force is determined by employment coefficient, that is H, and the ratio of output to productivity. The last assumption of DOMAR model is the past and present investment can generate productive capacity at a given ratio. This assumption is considered the central theme of DOMAR model. Due to managerial miscalculation, the new investment project will cause dismiss of old projects. If junking exists, it will slow down the productive of investment, which he represents in the equation as KT minus 1 is equals to IT minus DT into KT. Here, DT into KT is the amount of capital junked. So DT is the junking ratio.
Based on these assumptions, DOMAR has formulated his model based on the dual character of investment because it will increase the productive capacity and generate incomes. The two sides of investment provide the solution for steady growth. Before looking into the equation, let us know what the indicators represent. YD refers to the effective demand at full employment. YS refers to the level of supply at full employment. K refers to the real capital. I shows the net investment. Alpha shows the marginal propensity to save. And sigma shows the productivity of capital. Here, the first equation, YD is equals to I divided by alpha, explains the level of effective demand is directly related to the level of investment. An increase in the level of investment will directly increase the level of effective demand and vice versa. So, the effective demand is inversely related to the propensity to save. The propensity to save will decrease the level of effective demand and vice versa. This equation explains the demand side of the investment. Here, the second equation, y is equals to sigma into k, explains that the supply of output at full employment depends on two factors, that is, productive capacity of capital and the amount of real capital. Any increase or decrease in these two factors will reduce the supply of capital. It is the supply side of the investment. For equilibrium of demand and supply should balance. So here we have the third equation, YT is equals to YS, where the equality explains the conditions for steady growth. In order to maintain steady growth, the increment to the demand and supply equation to be given as changes in YD is equals to changes in income divided by alpha. Increment only in the effective demand and investment because these are variables. But there is no increment in alpha because it is constant. Changes in YS is equals to sigma changes in K. This equation explains that changes in the supply of output equal to the product of change in the real capital and the productivity of the capital. The change in the real capital is expressed as the net investment. Changes in K indicates investment. Substituting I in the place of changes in K, we get the equation as changes in YS is equals to sigma into I. The equality between equation 4 and 6 is the necessary condition for maintaining steady growth. While equating these two equations, we will get changes in I divided by I is equals to alpha into sigma. So this is represented as equation 7. Equation 7 shows that the growth rate of net investment, that is changes in I divided by I, equals to the product of marginal propensity to save and productivity of capital. The necessary condition for maintaining steady growth is delta I by I is equals to sigma into alpha, or delta Y by Y is equals to sigma into alpha. So the full employment requires investment and income to grow at a constant annual relative rate, which is equal to the product of the propensity to save and the average productivity of the investment. Let us now compare the HARROD and DOMAR model of growth. First, we are going to see the similarities of HARROD and DOMAR model. The first similarity is both the models based on the similar assumption. The second similarity is both the models employ the initial saving investment equality as the condition for steady growth. Third, both the models explain that capital is plenty. It is applicable for the advanced countries. Against Keynes' macrostatic theory, both the models have introduced dynamic theory. Fifth, both the models assume fixed capital output ratio and labor output ratio. Sixth, both the models depict cumulative divergence from equilibrium path, that is knife edge equilibrium. The last similarity is both the models designed in terms of exponential equilibrium path. Next, we are going to see the dissimilarities between HARROD and DOMAR model. First, both the models used marginal propensity to save, but in different perspectives. DOMAR assumed it as alpha and HARROD referred it as yes. The second dissimilarity between these two models is the productivity of capital is represented as sigma in DOMAR model and C in HARROD model. The dissimilarities between HARROD and DOMAR model is the productivity of capital is represented as sigma in DOMAR model and C in HARROD model. The coefficient sigma and C belongs to the supply side and it is known as accelerating coefficient. When investors make additional investment, it accelerates in the increase in income. The last dissimilarity between these two models is HARROD's accumulation of coefficient is psychologically determined, whereas DOMAR's accumulation of coefficient is determined by technologically. Though this model is very much helpful to the growth and development for many economies, this model also has certain criticisms. The first criticism of this model is unrealistic assumption. They are based on rigid, abstract, and unrealistic assumptions. For example, in short period, propensity to save and capital output ratio are assumed to be constant. But in the long run, these factors change for steady growth. Second, production function is fixed and factors of production can't be substituted for each other. But in reality, the factors of production can be substituted for one and each other in a dynamic economy through changes in the relative factor price. The third unrealistic assumption is production function can't be fixed in the long run. So this theory assumes a lot of unrealistic assumption, which is a major drawback of these two theories. The second criticism is the macro characters of model is open to objection. Any model based on the aggregate can hardly explain the relation among different sectors of an economy. This model fails to explain the structural changes taking place in various sectors of the economy. These models do not consider the growth requirements of individual sectors, and these arise the possibilities of disharmony among various sectors. The next criticism is variables are not expressed in money terms. That is, due to the real nature of variables, the influence of monetary factors on investment, savings, and demand, it is very difficult to analyze. So these models have not expressed in terms of money. The next criticism is exaggeration of instability. The real cause of instability is entrepreneurial behavior and the lag between investment decision and capital outlays. And due to the assumption of fixed factor proportion, there is an extreme instability which is not possible in the real world. The next criticism is natural growth rate is open to objection. The ceiling limit to growth is not only determined by the available labor and natural resources, but also the production techniques employed. The next criticism is limited relevance for underdeveloped countries. These models based on Keynesian economics, which concerned about the problems of capitalist world, that is cyclical unemployment. But underdeveloped countries face the problem of disguised unemployment due to the deficiency of capital. The next criticism is assumption of laissez-faire is unwarranted. The physical neutrality is an important component of laissez-faire policy, that it can rarely solve the problem of economic development. So, the laissez-faire policy and economic development are incompatible. These models based on the laissez-faire, which can hardly fit into the framework of development planning. So the last criticism is non-economic factors have been ignored. So these models reveal the importance of economic parameters alone. It excluded the non-economic parameters such as social, political, religion factors, etc. So the non-economic determinants are as important as economic determinants. The economic factors can initiate the process of economic development, and non-economic factors provide the necessary stimulus for the maintenance of stable growth. So these models do not cover the entire spectrum of the economic development. I hope I have made it clear. Thank you for watching this video patiently.